So, good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Tukenga. I'm the CEO and co founder of Rewoven, a textile recycling startup that is based in Cape Town, South Africa. So, today I want to talk to you about the future of fashion and present to you some solutions to the problem of fast fashion. And before I get into that, I know some of you are probably thinking, I'm not a fashion person, I'm not even involved in this fast fashion business, so I don't really care about this topic that we're speaking about today. But the reality of the situation is, whether you're a fashion person or not, we're all sitting here today wearing clothes, whether those clothes are fashionable or not. And so we are all clothing consumers. And the reality about that, and I think this is what I love about clothing so much, is that it's one of those industries that touches everyone's lives. Unfortunately, we are all involved in this problem. And the reality of the situation is that for our clothing to be made, it needs to emit a lot of carbon emissions. And so today I want to speak a little bit about that. So how is the clothing that we all have on our backs today contributing to this problem? So it does it in two ways, the clothing industry. The first is in the manufacturing process, right? How our clothing is actually made. And then the second is in the copious amounts of textile waste that the industry is generating. And a lot of people don't know, but for you to have clothing on your back right now, a lot of textile waste has to be generated. First of all, in the production process, right? So in the cutting process in particularly, there is 60 million meters square of off-cut fabric that is generated in that process. And all of that ends on the cutting room floor of clothing manufacturers, and they sweep it and they dump it at landfill. And then we only get to the textile waste that most of you probably know about and have heard about, which only comes at the end of the life cycle of the garment. So that's when you as a consumer are no longer interested in the garment, it's no longer in fashion, or now it's damaged, and so it ends up in landfill. So as the world, between these two types of textile waste, we are generating 92 million tons of textile waste every single year that is ending up in landfills. And if you don't know what that number looks like, I can translate it for you. It is the equivalent of a truckload full of clothes being burnt and dumped in landfill every second. So that is a lot of waste just for us to have clothes on our back. And only 1% of that is recycled in the world, and the rest of it just sits in landfill, decomposes, and emits methane gas. To make this problem even worse, of fast fashion, it's become so bad, particularly in the West, that the problem of overconsumption of clothing in the West has now spilt over into African landfills. And how does this happen? So we all donate our clothing, right? Well, 70% of the secondhand clothing that is donated, that is coming to the West, 70% of that ends up in Africa, but only 40% of that is reusable. So where does the rest go? So this is not donation, this is dumping. And so, as much as this is the problem that Africa did not contribute to creating, we're not the biggest consumers of clothing and fast fashion. We are now sitting with the problem of textile waste that we didn't even create. So, this is a pretty serious problem, but fortunately for you, I'm here to speak about the solutions. And as much as it's a problem, it's also a potential for us to create and see opportunities. And I think particularly for the African context, there are opportunities for us to explore. So I work for a company called Rewoven, as we've mentioned, and I really think that the solution to fighting fast fashion and how it's contributing to climate change really, as I've mentioned, is about two things. One, fixing the way we're making our clothes, and two, eliminating textile waste, right? So that's what we do at Rewoven. So we work with garment manufacturers, retailers, and any organization that generates textile waste. We collect that textile waste at source, so we divert it from landfill. And then once it's collected, it's then shredded. It's then cut down and taken back to its fiber form. So basically like a cotton fluff, as I say to people. And once it's in its fiber form, we're able to respin it into new yarn, and we're able to reweave it into new fabric. And this fabric that we make is exactly the same quality and the same aesthetic as fabric that was made from virgin material. And so then this fabric is then sold back to clothing manufacturers, it's sold back to designers, and then we create that circular loop in the clothing industry. And thereby, we're eliminating waste. That's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is, as I've spoken about, it's about the manufacturing process. We need to fix that, right? And so what we do at Rewoven in our fabric manufacturing process, it completely eliminates the dyeing process. And by the way, the dyeing process is one of the most environmentally harmful processes in our clothing production process. So our process does not have any dyeing. That means that it does not need to use any water and essentially ends up having a fabric manufacturing process that uses 50% less carbon emissions than the processes that are used today to make the clothing that you have. So then now we are improving how we're making our textile waste. The third thing that we do at Rewoven, so we've tackled those two things. We're passionate about circularity, but for me it's about circularity that is embedded in social sustainability, right? We can't just have circularity, it needs to be embedded in social and ecological sustainability for the whole system to be a good solution. And because I'm from South Africa, I don't know how many of you know this context in South Africa, but South Africa has a very high unemployment rate. In fact, we're actually sitting at 70% unemployment for the youth, which is pretty staggering. But the recycling process is pretty labor intensive, right? Particularly for people with low skills. And so we see textile recycling being an opportunity not only to help with the carbon emissions and climate change, but to also solve the unemployment problem that we have back home. Particularly if we can leverage tech and create gig jobs in this opportunity, we can really do something great. The last thing that we do at Rewoven, so I've spoken about recycling and breaking down fibers, right? I want to talk about, before we even get to recycling, I want us to talk about reuse, especially because I'm speaking to clothing consumers today. So we also encourage reuse where we take a lot of end-of-roll fabric from big garment manufacturers who have bulk orders, and so they have a lot of leftover fabric, and we sell those to designers, like the designer who made my outfit today, and they upcycle it and they make new garments, and so we encourage that reuse process in addition to recycling. And I want to talk about the brand. It's called Rethread. They're based in South Africa, that made my outfit. Not only do they upcycle, by the way, but they also put their garments on a renting platform. And because I'm speaking to consumers, I really need us to understand that the future of fashion is about the shared economy. We need to change our mindset towards one that is allowing us to share garments, share resources, particularly in this fast fashion industry. And so that's something that I really love about Rethread, is that they enable the reuse and sharing of garments using tech platforms and embracing that shared economy. And so the last thing that I do want to say, I do have a little bit more time. I thought that I wouldn't have enough time. Sorry about that. So over here I have like 4 points to the big solutions that I wanted to present today to fast fashion. But we don't have time to tackle all of fast fashion's problem today, so I've only today spoken about the first point, which is, in conclusion, right? One of the biggest things we can do to solve the fast fashion problem is, 1, embrace circularity that is embedded in social sustainability, right? And 2, we need to embrace the shared economy. And we have technology today, platform economy, that can enable that process as well. And so I would have loved to talk about the mindset shift and Ubuntu consciousness and how that can help in the shared economy. I would have loved to talk about regenerative systems, particularly in the clothing industry. And I would have also loved to touch on technology, right? Because technology helps us scale things, it helps us make things faster. But I don't have time for that today. If there's anything you can take from this, is reuse, recycling, embedded in social responsibility, and please, please, please embrace sharing. We need to change our mindset from thinking sharing is not cool to actually realizing that sharing is the future. Thank you.